All right, good evening, guys. It's your boy, Atypical Security Guard. I'm here with a subscriber question of the day. Subscriber reached out to me and said, hey, I have a question. Under what circumstances can I put my hand on my firearm? And I think that what he was asking was, a lot of times in law enforcement situations, when police officers are potentially approaching the car on a vehicle stop, if police officers are approaching a door, any situation where there is a potential danger perceived to the police officers. Sometimes if you're watching on cops or if you're watching in movies or television, you'll see the police officer kind of stage his hand on his firearm, right? And the security guard was asking, like, is it possible or is it feasible or acceptable for security guards to do the same? Now, I'm going to say a couple of things here before I give any opinion, right? I'm going to preface this with I work in Portland, Oregon. A lot of times when I'm giving my opinions on security guard matters, I'm talking to you guys from a general sense, but my attitude and outlook is very much colored by the fact that I work in Portland, Oregon, which is an extremely liberal, left-leaning environment. A lot of things that would fly or would go over, down south or more on the East Coast, that's not the case here. Now, I don't say that to necessarily say that that's a bad thing. I don't think in private security, seeing as how we do not have qualified immunity, we do not have a union, we work under a contract status and at will hire status. I think that the fact that I work in an area where I have to be way more mindful of little things like this, I think that keeps security guards and the security industry out of more trouble than it gets them in, right? So when I say that I work in a very liberal area, there's some aspects of that I don't like and I don't really appreciate. But in terms of how it kind of leads to me doing my job and working in this industry, I do think that to an extent, that's a good thing. That's number one. Number two, you have to do as a security guard what you think is best for you. That falls within the post orders of the place that you're working. That is legal, and you need to understand the repercussions of anything that you do. That's going to be anything that you do in terms of taking action, and also anything that you do in terms of not taking action. So let's get back to the topic at hand. Again, in law enforcement situations, felony stops where police officers feel that they might be in danger, you will see them on television, in movies, and in reality, placing their hand on their firearm and staging in case they have to draw that firearm already being in that position. I do not think in a security capacity, my personal opinion, if your hand is going anywhere near your firearm, it should be the exact same circumstances that you would draw your firearm, right? So I will tell you, for the company that I work for, and in the environment that I work in, and in the environment in which I live here in Portland, if we were to place our hand on our firearm in the commission of our duties, right? That would lead to, at the very least, an investigation and could potentially get you removed from a site, right? And then depending on the circumstances, and this is where it gets a little dicey and a little spicy. If you guys have been following some of these more viral situations that have happened with security guards, the situation that happened in Seattle with the security guard who walked up on the young lady, accused her of shoplifting, got into the back and forth situation like that, that security guard verbalized that he was going to, quote unquote, make a detainment, potentially take this person down to the floor. And while doing this, had a set of handcuffs in his hands. Guys, that is an assault, right? That is a potential aggravated assault based on anything that could potentially happen with that. If you're in a situation where you're found to not have been in compliance with either your post orders, compliance with the law to have made this detainment, to have made this stop, to have been approaching this person in any capacity that you're working in security, your hand on your firearm could actually be categorized as an assault. You have to be very, very careful. So in my terms of what I see, what I do, and how I would respond, my hand only goes towards my weapon if I'm drawing my firearm. There's never a situation where I'm utilizing my hand in that area to potentially intimidate someone, to potentially put someone in a position where maybe they're more willing to comply to whatever it is that I'm saying or doing. You have to be very, very careful of that. This is why it's important to understand the laws of your area, the laws of the areas in which you're working, the ordinances. All of this stuff is so important. And I think a lot of times, security guards, you get into this industry and you're thinking to yourself, if I feel threatened, I have the authority to protect myself. If I feel threatened, I can do X, Y, and Z. But when you're working in a capacity and you have this firearm on you and you have all these other tools at your disposal, you have to be very, very careful that you're not putting yourself in a situation where you're becoming the aggressor. And a lot of times, people are not thinking about what constitutes self-defense or defense of a third person, right? Just so you're aware, if you're new to this channel, if you're new to this conversation, there's generally 5 things that have to be present. 5 things that have to be present for you to be able to legally and justifiably claim self-defense in terms of using lethal force, lethal or deadly force, right? Number 1 is complete innocence. You didn't do anything to initiate or start this problem. Number 2 is that the threat has to be imminent. It's happening right now. Any objective, sane person would look at the situation and say, in that moment, there was nothing else that could happen. It was going to happen right then, and he had to respond, right? Number 3 is going to be proportionality. Are you answering the threat with a proportionate level of force, right? Number 4, do you have the ability and the opportunity to retreat? At any given time, could you have backed up? Could you have run away? Could you have gotten out of that situation, right? And then number 5 is reasonableness. Is what you did reasonable? Absent any one of those things, you're putting yourself into a situation where now it's getting a little bit questionable, right? And as a security guard, we have no duty to act. Guys, even police officers do not have a duty to act. So if you find yourself in a situation where you are inadvertently reaching for your firearm, drawing your firearm, presenting your firearm, and God forbid, utilizing your firearm, and you didn't have to based on those 5 elements, based on those 5 principles, you might find yourself afoul of the law. It is so important to think about all of these situations before you get into them. That's why I come on here and I answer these questions. That's why I do, podcasts, why I do my videos, is because I'm not trying to teach you. I don't have the authority to teach you guys. I don't have the right to try and dictate what you do or how you do it. I have been in this industry for a little bit of time. I've seen a little bit of stuff. I've done a little bit of things, right? And I want to bring these questions to you. I want to share my knowledge with you in an effort for you to go, hey, let me think about that. What are some of the situations that I found myself in? What are some of the situations that I could find myself in? How would I respond? Because if you're thinking about these things well before they happen, when you start to see the gears of motion start to turn, and you will, when you're interacting with that person who's getting a little bit heated, and they're starting to get more and more angry. They're becoming more and more aggressive. They're starting to lash out. They're tensing up. They're talking shit. They're looking around. They're patting their pockets, right? You're going to start to pick up on the signs. Okay, now we're starting to get there. Okay, all right, I see what's happening here. I'm going to start backing up. I'm going to start backing up, positioning myself in a way that now there's something between me and this person. I'm going to start talking to my principals, whether that's your manager of your store, your loss prevention officer, maybe it's a customer or some kids. You start backing people up and you start thinking to yourself, if I have to take a shot, where am I taking that shot? Am I aiming this way or that way? What's my backstop? What's behind me? What's behind this guy? What's potentially going to come in front of me? All of this is happening. Boom, 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 boom. Split seconds. Not because you're that awesome of an officer, not because you're that well trained. It's because you've thought about these scenarios before they have happened. I love it when someone reaches out to me and says, hey, when can I do this? When can I do that? Because my answer is, I can give you my opinion. I can tell you what I think. I can lay out some of the things that you need to think about before you get there, right? But I can't tell you what to do because I'm not going to be there in your shoes, in your circumstance when it happens. But the best thing that I can do is ask you some questions, make you think, make you dive into what you know, right? Ask the questions about, do you know your policy? Do you know the laws? Do you know the ordinances? Do you know what your post orders are, right? And so they start thinking about these things. They start checking off these boxes. And then somewhere down the road, when the situation happens, and guys, I guarantee you at some point in time in your career, if you do this long enough, it will happen. You will be able to better answer that question for yourself. Okay? Let me check these quick comments here. Somebody says, do you have any combat experience? I served 6 years in the Air Force on a nuclear system. That's all I'm going to say about that. Someone says, I'm proud of you, young man. You're such a professional human. I appreciate that. Thank you. Vincent says, ex-Air Force and Army from St. Louis. I used to live in Kansas City. Someone says, thank you for your service. My absolute pleasure. I love this country. All right, guys. That's all I got for you. Okay? I'll see you later on.